let's talk about writing side quests. So, I really like Yakuza's side quests. They call them side stories, and I figured it would be a good time to talk about some of the techniques they use. These are my takeaways. These are things I learned from analyzing Yakuza's side stories. Feel free to have your own takeaways. These are not universal truths. These are just things that I noticed while I was analyzing Yakuza. So I already did this, sort of. A couple years ago, I made a video on the side stories in a particular Yakuza game, and one of the takeaways was that those side stories all started and ended in the same emotional state. They could go through jumping jacks in the middle, but they always started and ended lighthearted. That way you can chain them together in any order, any number of them, with gaps or not, as you prefer, and there won't ever be any whiplash. It'll always feel natural. Keeps it smooth. The other thing I noted is that if the player character is going through an arc, like say he's pretending to be somebody he's not, then all the side quests are about that. They are also about people pretending to be somebody they're not. And that gives you a bunch of different lenses, a bunch of different takes on the same theme. Yeah, those are great, but they're awfully theoretical, aren't they? They're not really telling you how to write a side story so much as sort of how to conceptualize one. So let's talk about something a little bit more concrete. Some people live in fear that their gameplay is boring. We've got to write compelling gameplay rather than just writing fetch quests. And, no, that's bad. If you put compelling gameplay into your side story, I'm likely to get annoyed. And I think that's true of a lot of people, because the point is the story. We're trying to get to the next piece of the story. And if the gameplay is in our way, we're just going to feel like you don't want us to get to the next part of the story. And if the gameplay is compelling, then by the time we get to the next part of the story, we've forgotten about it because we've been compelled by the gameplay. We've been focused on the gameplay. At least that's my take. And it seems like Yakuza has the same take. So instead of thinking about how to create better gameplay, what we need to think about is how to use crappy gameplay in a compelling way. The way Yakuza does it is they use gameplay as intermission. A break. So, for example, if we were going to make a side story about a sick little girl waiting for her surgery, looking out her window at a persimmon tree, which is an actual example, we want that to be a long, slow boil. So we want the intermissions to be really long and soft and low energy. So we just put in a gap. Once you're finished with this little beat, then you're just done for a while. And whenever you come back, you come back. It's very, very low energy. So that gives us a very, very soft background story. But we don't always want that. Sometimes we want something a little bit more focused. So in those cases, we might use a navigation request. Go over to the other side of the map and get us something, or talk to somebody, or whatever. Now, this will be something that we have to do. We're traveling across the world map, and that does keep us focused to some extent, and it does take some amount of time. But there's lots of distractions, there's lots of other stuff going on, so it's kind of like a low focus intermission. It's a great way to sort of build a little bit of energy and a little bit of attachment, but it's not going to really put a lot on the line. It's a very soft, not as soft as the full gap, obviously, but it's a very soft sort of beat that we might put into a story that doesn't have a lot of high stakes. If we need something a little bit sharper, a little bit shorter, we might put in a shorter intermission with a fight, or whatever other gameplay we normally use for this sort of situation, like a race or a puzzle. A fight will simply inject energy into the story. It's an intermission where we build up some energy, or we pay energy out. Like, oh, we're really tense. We know a fight's coming. Here's the fight. Wow, that was great. What's next? If we want that sort of energy, then we get that sort of energy. We use an intermission that raises our energy level, that allows us to convert all of that built-up tension into emotional release. And that's great for fights, right? And lastly, there's the king of really, really short intermissions, when you just need a little burst of energy, when you just need to punch it up a touch. That's when you give the player a choice. Just a pop-up menu. Do you go booty beep beep with your hands up like everybody else in the cult, or do you do it booty beep beep Or do you not do it at all? Very, very basic sort of choice making, right? The choices are usually irrelevant, or if they aren't irrelevant, then the side quests are usually irrelevant. So they're not very high stakes, but they do exist, and they'll punch up your energy level. They'll make you more invested in the story. They'll make you pay attention much more sharply because now you're making a choice. And they're really short. Very, very short. Almost not even noticeable as an intermission. But they are. The story has stopped. You have been told to do something. That's an intermission. And then you come back and the story resumes. So if we look at this, we've got this range of lengths for our intermission, and we can adjust them, right? Does the navigation challenge have a timer? Then it's shorter, right? Shorter and higher focus. It's closer to a fight. By knowing that this range of options exists, we can choose the options that tell the story that we want to tell. We can support our story by producing opportunities to put in these intermissions. So when we are writing our side story, we're looking for places where we want to change the energy level of the audience, where we want to get them more invested or pay off that energy or build up more energy. And we choose the kind of intermission that will allow us to do that. We write it into the story as something that the player would expect. So there's no little old lady sitting outside the hut going, "Go kill 12 wolves," because that's not a story. Now, a little old lady might tell us to go kill 12 wolves, but only if that little old lady's story suddenly has an opportunity where it makes sense to make that request. She wouldn't tell us to go kill 12 wolves, but she might tell her side story, and it might involve 12 wolves. And then, at the end, Kiryu could look at the camera and say, "I think we should go see if there's some wolves around." You can see how that allows us to buy in to the fetch quest. It's no longer go kill 12 wolves because the old lady tells you to. It's go kill 12 wolves because the main character cares about this old lady. And the main character has chosen to do that. It's progressing the story. This sort of trick is something that can be used in so many different contexts as long as you're paying attention. Even something as simple as a choice. Once you understand that it's an intermission that injects energy, you can find all sorts of places where you just need a little bit more energy in your side story. So there it is. Just inject it. Pow, pow, pow. Oh, we need a little bit of a payoff, a little bit of a roll. We'll put in a fight. Pow, 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 pow. We're not putting in good gameplay. We're not putting in compelling gameplay. We're putting in gameplay that interrupts the story to inject the right amount of an emotion, to inject the right amount of investment. Now that said, there is one mistake that fetch quests often make, and that's the reason I didn't use any fetch terms over here. Because a fetch quest is usually not one intermission. It's usually 2 intermissions. Didn't you hear the old lady? Go kill 12 wolves? Go kill 12 wolves? That's an intermission followed by an intermission. Now, obviously, it depends on your gameplay, but in general, that's not going to be a very good structure. So if we decide we're going to go kill 12 wolves for that old lady, we don't go kill 12 wolves. We see the wolves, and then we have another story beat where we decide to kill them. Or maybe we decide not to kill them because we realize that, they're living happy little lives with their cubs, or whatever else we want to do, right? So by understanding these as intermissions, we can start to carve our side quests up into much more chunky bits that roll through much more easily. Like, go kill 12 wolves is a navigation followed by a fight, but a navigation is fundamentally very low energy. It's, unless we're doing something like, you've got 3 minutes to get to the wolves, it's fundamentally going to be pretty low energy. So when we get to the wolves, we're in a low energy state. We don't want to roll from that into a fight, because a fight is about converting our investment into payoff, into emotional payoff. And we're not we're not emotionally invested right now. We just moved across the map for a while. We need to bring back that emotional investment. We need to have a beat where we bring up the actual story and we pay it off with the fight. And once you start to think like that, suddenly things start to open up and things start to make sense. And sure, that might not be the only way to write side quests, but it seems like a pretty good one. Anyway, let me know what you think. I don't even know if this was coherent. It's like 2 in the morning. Have a good one.